According to studies in 2019, over 20% of Americans suffer from mental illness. In the wake of COVID 19, these increased tremendously. Drug addiction, alcoholism, and suicide is at an all time high, and that's why I've set out on a mission to create awareness about the importance of mental health. I'm Janaé Lopez, a pre-doctoral clinical psychology student, and welcome to Mental Health Matters on Mental Health Mondays.
Mental health matters. Mental health matters. Mental health matters.
We as a community and as men oftentimes don't think that we have the time or the luxury of tending to the thing that's not quite right internally because we have to keep moving forward. And I think in terms of what I would love to add to this conversation is that once we start to see that it's not a luxury but a necessity to actually move forward.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, but even in that word luxury, I mean, that's the thing. And I think I talked to you about this a little bit, which is why season 2 is so important. You know, a lot of folks were like, well, you know, we love Keely. You know, we love seeing a Keely on the screen. Why are you jumping? And I was like, no, we gonna still see Keely. Everybody calm down. All the aunties who wanna see Keely, they gonna see Keely. What I needed to show was that this entity, that person who is taking care of mom, trying to take care of family, trying to get into the school, learning all those skills and on the hustle, right? That person is still alive in the 30, 35-year-old, 40-year-old man right now. And that's that word luxury. When you get to a point where you can live in a luxury high rise, but you can't take the luxury of like making sure that your anxiety level is down. Sure. Like, what is luxury? Yeah. Like to me, it is luxurious to now find peace. Right. Like, keep peace. Absolutely. Right?
All right. Well, welcome everyone back to Mental Health Mondays with Janaé. We have a very, very interesting and much needed talk to have today. And I am delighted to have someone who I call my friend, Josh Sherman, or Joshua Sherman, whatever you guys know him by. And he has joined me today to discuss men's mental health. So Josh was born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, and is currently living in Chicago. He is a board certified emergency physician at Advocate Christ Medical Center, a clinical director of medicine, and a department's director of community outreach. So welcome, Josh. Good to have you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
I am too. I think this is a much needed conversation that needs to be had. And I think a lot of people need to know more about what it's like, perhaps being a Black man in America today, and also what it's like to have your mental health affected by it. So today we are going to be discussing just the topic of men's mental health and kind of ensuring that people know that you are not alone, basically, in this struggle, in this fight, and in the world that we live in today. So this is a candid conversation about your journey and how you arrived and who you are and what it means to be a Black man, specifically in the cultural climate we live in today. So what do you want to get out of this, or what message are you hoping to translate to our viewers today?
Actually, I think that you very well stated a message that's near and dear to my heart that I hope to share too, about the you are not alone, and we are all experiencing very similar, though different in its own by its own right, but very similar foundations of issues that are affecting us, especially as Black men or as Black people. But for the sake of this conversation, as Black men, and to kind of share my experience, which I'm always very open about. I just look forward to like starting the dialogue and continuing the dialogue in hopes of someone hearing something that touches them and encourages them to seek whatever that next step might be in their journey.
Definitely. I always say that in doing this, if I could reach one person, then I've kind of done my job. So I'm hoping that this reaches somebody today, as they listen, or somebody's loved one, or just anybody. So why don't we talk about you for a little while? Like, where are you from? What do you really do for a living? What do you like to do for fun? When do you know you wanted to be a doctor? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
That's fair. My story isn't too exciting, but I am from New Orleans, Louisiana. I grew up there, spent my entire life there for the first 17 or 18 years. After which I went to LSU in Baton Rouge, which is only like 60 miles up west of the city.
Right.
Came back to New Orleans for med school, and then I stayed in the city for med school and residency as well. And then I
Hmm.
just left about 4 years ago. I came up to Chicago. 4.5 years that I've been here now. Certainly a difficult transition at first, but it's become a city that I have grown to love. Like, I like living here. I can see myself living here for a long time. I think I've had similar opportunities to be impactful here, because this city, unfortunately, suffers from some of the same problems that New Orleans did, or does: crime,
Right.
uh, education system that's lacking. And so, like, very similar cities. And I think that's why I've been able to find like my niche, or find my sort of place in this large city. And then, in terms of when I decided I wanted to be a doctor, or when I actually knew that I could be a doctor, it's a funny story, because you and I don't know how many people know this, but met in this
Right.
program called the Summer Science Program, which was essentially
Long time
a
ago.
long time ago. It seems like so long ago. It
It
seems like
does.
such a
It
long time.
does.
I think we were in what, the 11th or 12th grade or something
I
like that.
think both, because I
Yeah,
think we both did two
that's
years, right?
yep, we both did both
Yeah.
years. And so the summer of 11th grade year when we met, there was a guy, the director of the program, Dr. Edward Helm, sort of introduced myself and various folks, you included, to different aspects of the medical field and just different careers in medicine or surrounding medicine and in the medical field in general. And it was through that I discovered my love for emergency medicine, which is the specialty that I practice, and what that looks like on a day to day for me. I split my time between two, well, three, but two in particular, very large trauma centers here.
Mm,
I work at Avatar,
okay.
which is on the far south side of Chicago. And then I also work at the University of Chicago, which is on the south side, a little bit closer to downtown. But very similar to the place where I worked in New Orleans, which was University Hospital, otherwise known as the New Charity. It's a very busy uh, emergency department trauma unit where we see everything from grandma and grandpa's strokes and heart attacks, to someone shot, someone stabbed, someone's delivering baby. So
Hmm.
very diverse population of patients.
I'm sure no day is the same.
No day, no day has been the same in any of the time I've been doing this. In fact, minute to minute, your mood changes, your expectations change. It's such a whirlwind of emotions that the
Hmm.
job, believe it or not, is what encouraged me to step into mental health, or step into protecting my own mental health, I guess you would say.
Mm,
Like, when you walk out of a
interesting.
room, yeah, walk
Okay.
out of a room of someone who looks like me, who's shot in the head, and I can see the brain matter. I can't save them, and I'm having to tell this family member that their loved one died. But then in the next room, in the next patient I'm taking care of, a baby's being born. So I can't carry
Mm.
that with me even 5 minutes, and I have to learn how to adapt. And as you can imagine, that certainly takes its toll on a person. I don't think I'm special with that. So
I think
that's
we're definitely going to come back to that when we kind
sure.
of get into the meat and potatoes of talking about like the effects of mental health and, you know, what it's like to actually be you as the doctor, but then also reminding yourself like I'm human too, because I think sometimes that gets lost in some of our professions, that other people forget that we're still human and we have feelings and our mood changes and we carry the burdens of the world against us as just like anybody else,
Yeah,
basically. So
exactly.
I definitely think that's something we should come back to.
Sure.
But just for fun, um, what's on your playlist?
On my
What keeps you motivated, you know, in the maybe in the gym, keep your day-to-day going in those moments where it get rough at work and you be like, I need a break. So what's on your playlist?
That's good. That's a good question. My playlist with as little judgment as possible from anybody listening to this, But
Of course, judgment free zone, guys. Judgment free zone.
my playlist is it's two extremes, and so my
Okay.
normal everyday listen, right? My like music that I can like vibe to at the house when I'm chilling would be
Uh-huh.
old school, Johnny Taylor, Al Green, the
Mm,
OJ's, Anita Baker, Gladys Knight. That's what I listen to because I grew
the
up
classics.
the classics. I grew up youngest of four. My mom likes that stuff, and so that's what I listen to. But in high stress situations, at the gym, at work, um, or even in situations not necessarily high stress, but when I'm like, in a mood, when everything isn't all kosher and chill. I recently
Hmm.
got into this like Chicago drill music, like this hardcore
Tell
beat,
me more.
blood, bloodful, that sort of stuff. And so I've been listening to that like tremendously, like all the time. Love for Chief Keef and all the heavy hitters out here in Chicago. I've I was introduced to that when I moved here, and I've kind of taken to it. I listen to it as often as possible. A
Okay.
big
I
change,
love
big
it.
change for me.
I absolutely love it. I like the diversity
Yeah.
in the music.
Oh yeah.
Because sometimes, we need something to kind of help feed our soul, but then sometimes we need to release our
Exactly.
inner soul, or as I like to call it, my inner ratchet side. It kind of comes out a little bit. So, we all need that. We all need that in our lives every
Yeah.
now and then.
It's therapeutic.
Um,
It is
it
therapeutic.
is therapeutic,
Absolutely.
right? I mean, music alone has so many different benefits, which will probably be a whole nother segment to
Absolutely.
talk about. But yeah, it's definitely therapeutic.
100%. 100%.
So, what has been your most rewarding experience you've had thus far at this point in your life?
Ooh, my most rewarding experience at this time of my life. I kind of um I've been asked that question once before, and I can't necessarily decide because I always tend to separate, and I don't know if this is good or bad, but like the professional me from just the me, if you will, like my personal.
Mm-hmm.
And so the professional me, I feel like my most rewarding achievement to this point has been just being here, right? Just like being in a position to
Mm,
work at two of the like most coveted academic medical centers in this region and like have a great job and the career is going well and to be recognized continually for the good work that I do for at the hospital, at the bedside, and for the community. That to me is big, and I don't take that for granted. I'm appreciative of that. But then, strangely enough, my what I consider to be one of my biggest personal feats has been, and take this with a grain of salt because I know people feel differently about this, but personally, it has been having the courage, if you will, to
mm,
leave what was so familiar to me and growing up living in New Orleans, staying there my entire life, and having established myself there, and really taking a step out on faith, and not knowing what I was going to encounter when I came here, and just coming here and reestablishing something essentially by myself, and and thriving in that personally, professionally, socially, and really in every aspect. And so those two things for me are things that I cherish and hold near and dear, and no one can ever take that away from me as the day can be going horribly. But I actively remind myself of the courage it took to do both of those things. And I'm very proud of that.
I love it. I think that's something that a lot of people need to hear, but also need to see from different backgrounds, not just our Black and brown community or just our men, but then also just from other people, that they see that, if you put in the work and you put in the effort and you have the courage to stay dedicated and maybe follow your passions, you can do a lot, or your life can change for even something greater than you imagined before. So
Absolutely.
I absolutely love that.
100%.
But we know that this is all about mental health.
Yep.
And, I'm sure that you and I can kind of talk about different stuff for hours. But why don't you tell us, like, how do you connect to mental health? What's your story?
My story, or my connection or introduction to mental health, as I was kind of alluding to earlier, really didn't come until um, jumping into this profession was my introduction to it, honestly. Despite, which
Hmm.
is strange because despite having, going through Katrina when I was in high school, despite having been, my entire family is displaced and people are all over the place, despite having lost my dad when I was a junior in high school. Like none of that stuff brought me to mental health, arguably should have in retrospect, but none of that
Mhm.
stuff brought me to mental health. The thing that brought me to mental health was seeing every day people that were shot, stabbed, victims of domestic or intimate partner violence, like all of these traumatic things, and people that look just like me every single day, and then being expected to, go home,
Mm.
act like everything's okay, and enjoy a normal life, if you will, and still be the Josh that people have come to know me to be, the, funny, always outgoing, always down for the party, that dude. And so it was for a time a little bit difficult for me to to place both of those people in this one
Mm.
body person. And so that was a challenge, and that actually brought me to counseling, to my therapist, who I have been seeing for the past 4 years. And our relationship has certainly blossomed as he has helped me to like walk through this. And so that was my initial
Mhm.
connection to mental health. I don't carry, full disclosure, any specific diagnoses. I don't, consider myself to be one, disease, or one mental health
Right, right.
diagnosis over the other. But as we all do, we certainly like straddle the line of multiple things depending on where we are, what's going on. Sometimes I feel
Absolutely.
depressed, sometimes I feel anxious, sometimes it's, I want to lay in the bed all day. Other times, it changes just like that, like it does with a lot of people. But that experience is what brought me to mental health, and
Mhm.
I'm glad that it did.
I'm happy that it did too, and kudos to you for, acknowledging that, or, labeling that or identifying that within yourself, and knowing that, like, okay, I've done all that I probably can do on my own, but this is a lot,
Yes.
right? And sometimes we need that other person
Yep.
to give us in kind of an objective perception, or I guess you would say, look into the mirror,
Yeah.
basically, of what is really happening with me. Like, why is this happening? How can I get better, or how can I do better for myself? Because, me coming from this side of things, being in psychology, I often tell my like patients, or like the students I work with now, like, at some point I want you to not need me, right? And so, but sometimes that's a journey, and that takes time, and it takes effort and practice, and it's not done overnight, because these things that you're coming to see me for didn't just happen overnight. So you can't expect
Exactly.
it to just be fixed like that, or it's I'm the magic pill. I'm like, no, it doesn't quite work like that. So kudos to you for kind of taking that step that I think some people may be fearful to take. But I don't know, speaking from personal experience, and even just other people that I know in different professions or walks of life, there's so much greater on the other side,
So much
I
greater.
guess. So
So much
yes.
greater. There is so much greater on the other side that I'm only scratching the surface of it at this point, even years into it. And I would just say,
Hmm.
alluding to what you just said about it being a journey, not happening overnight, I think that that's something worth restating, because that people's, knowing that someone can be invested in them along this journey can literally be the difference
Hmm.
between life and death. So thank you for saying that.
Yes, awesome. Yes, I love it. So, as we kind of get into talking about mental health, and, what it's like perhaps to be on your side as the doctor who patients come to see, but also as the person who've experienced their own mental health journey. Um, Research and experience, as I'm sure you know, tells us that Black men's perceptions of manhood are intrinsically linked to their level of education, their economic status, and the increased independence of Black women. So, in your opinion, how would you define manhood, or where do you think you've cultivated that perception?
That is a very that's an interesting question with a lot of inherent like subjectivity, which
Mm-hmm.
I think personally, if I had to like give a definition of what manhood means, I think manhood in the most vague sense of the word is being able to step up to the plate when you're needed most for yourself and for other people, to display
Mhm.
strength, courage, wisdom, as well as have the ability to listen and learn. So I think man
Mm.
is just a combination of all of those things at its core, and those things ideally are taught to us through various channels. Like we learn some of it at home, hopefully, if we have that strong figure to learn from. That figure doesn't have to be our father. That figure could also be our strong mother, our strong grandmother, our grandfather, various people that instill in us these characteristics. But we learn a lot of it also in our various relationships as we traverse
Mm.
childhood, teenage years, and go through the struggles that all of us face in our lives. I think it may become problematic when manhood starts to, for some people, take on this superiority, this definition, this like this kind of misogynistic sort of,
Mm.
certainly there's certainly a bunch of negative connotations that can go with it. But I think at its core, it's positivity and leadership, mixed with all those things that I mentioned before, that has the ability to transform the person as well as everyone that's around him.
And I think absolutely love your definition, by the way. But I think one of the things that stood out to me is like when you said like that ability to listen and to learn, right? So I think that part sometimes gets lost in how we define what manhood or what masculinity is. And we automatically come with these expectations of, well, men are just supposed to know, right? As if they're not learning and growing at the same time or like we are too. So I think that is kind of key, that I think some, which might be worthwhile for some people to maybe add to their definition or how they identify as a man, to kind of open themselves up to, perhaps you're going to fail sometimes, or perhaps you may not be strong all the time, or perhaps there's some lessons in life's experiences that you can learn from that will make you an even better man, right? So I think that's a very important part to kind of think about, or maybe worthwhile some people just kind of putting it in the back of their mind about, okay, well, perhaps he still has some room to learn and grow too, right, along this journey of manhood. Because just like, I tend to focus on cultural competency in my research. And just like that, it's not like overnight you're going to magically become culturally competent. Well, just like overnight, you're not going to magically just know what it is to be a man or who you are as a
Yeah,
man, right? So it's the same thing. It's a journey. It's,
absolutely.
it's a spectrum,
Yep.
basically.
Absolutely. I
So,
agree with everything you said, every word of it. It's a journey, it's a spectrum. You have to be open to listen, to learn. I think it becomes problematic when people start to succumb to, and oftentimes, subconsciously, not on purpose, but start to succumb to societal pressures that tell you, oh, you have
mm,
have this much money, you have to do this type of job, you have to do this, you have to do that. And then societal pressures also translated to like family pressures. In this current climate, there are racial pressures. There's so many external factors that I think contribute to a black man's ability, or a black man's definition of what manhood is, what it looks like
hmm,
for him. That I think that in and of itself is a whole nother, animal, a whole nother beast that's worth exploration.
absolutely.
Definitely. Definitely.
Absolutely. And so it's funny, but maybe not funny, but how you mentioned like about societal pressure. So one thing that I think, especially our younger generations, right? Not saying that we're that old, but our younger generations, right, are heavily influenced by the media. And I mean, and this can be traced back to how men were depicted in like The Color Purple, or being depicted like in a negative light or something like that. Do you think like those images or portrayals of men have kind of helped shape what manhood is all about? And if so, like, do you think it's changed any?
Shape, I would use this phrase, help to shape it, kind of cautiously. I will say that I think
Mm-hmm.
if nothing else, some of the negative representations of men, manhood, especially Black men, what Black manhood is shown as, have certainly sort of had negative impacts in various forms, especially when it relates to the media. For instance, like as recently when we look at the Black male being portrayed as, in even in movies, like if we take away from the
Yes.
factual stuff, when you look at movies, we have all of these roles of the hardcore criminal, the more likely to have the roles in the prison system, or whatever the role may be. Some of these characteristic quote unquote roles in
Hmm.
movies that we go to watch that we love, that sort of shapes who our adolescents, teenagers, young men think that they should grow up to be like. We see
Mm,
less and less Black male physicians, less and less Black male attorneys, lawyers, like all of these things in the media and as a whole. That I'm a firm believer that unless you see it, it's really hard for you to become it. It's not impossible, but
mm,
seeing it all definitely has the potential to alter your course. And so when we're not seeing that, and instead we're seeing, the pants sagging, everybody,
mm.
doing whatever, we all going to the club, hitting the bottle, hitting the blunt, whatever. Like that to some people is what manhood looks like. Believe it or not,
Yeah.
it's scary to see.
Unfortunately, and
Absolutely.
that's not to put um I guess a damper on those who live that lifestyle,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Those who are part of that lifestyle, or those who have quote unquote made it, right? Because in a lot of ways, maybe they too have worked hard to
yeah.
achieve the dreams that they wanted, to get out of their neighborhoods, or to be what people, to not be who people expected them to be, right? So, and that's not to say that, but I definitely get that, like your point of, like, it's kind of hard to become it if you don't see it. And just as, I guess, you would say, like, highlighted or kind of held on a pedestal of like physicians and attorneys in order for you to quote unquote make it. I also think it's important for like our youth and adolescents and young adults to know what it means to do the other side of work, like, the trade skills. Like, we need those people too, and like you can make a great living
Yep.
doing those things, owning your business, or managing a company or something like that. So I think it goes both ways, and kind of seeing both sides of things, that you don't always have to be the athlete or quote unquote this particular person in order to be considered great, I
I
guess you would say.
Very well said. I
Yeah.
agree 100%. Hearing you, listening to you speak reminds me that manhood is much less, and probably has very little, or if anything, to do with what you do in terms of professionally, and has everything to do with who we are at our core, who
Yes.
our values are, and who you are, no matter what. There are some people who have been in that life that we've described, and their manhood is unquestioned, right? They may be the most kind gentlemen that are doing the right things, and
Hmm.
model citizens that just chose a different path. So it has less to do, I think, with what we're doing, and much more to do with who we are, which I think trumps all of, like, everything.
I definitely agree with you. Do you think, like, how the media has portrayed, I guess, the black man has like affected you in any way, or like your mental health, or how you approach situations, or
Yeah.
maybe how you not approach situations
Yeah.
even. So,
Um, I didn't realize that it had affected me as much as it does until this year, where, as we all
mm,
know, all of the traditional media outlets, the news, the radio, everything, every time you turn around, there's something regarding violence against Black men, or,
mhm,
police brutality, or, various incidents that remind me every day of just where I stand in the grand scheme of society, kind of, which sounds kind of
mm,
harsh to say, but like, I, put on my scrubs, put on my little coat, and I go to the hospital all the time. But the minute I walk out of that hospital, like, nobody cares what I do. I'm reminded all the
mm,
time that nobody cares. You can be the best emergency room doctor on this side of the world, but when I walk
right?
out of that hospital and I'm driving my car to my house, people don't care what I do, right? And so I'm just another black man driving in, name that neighborhood, and I'm just as afraid as um, every
Mm,
other black man is at various points in various times. So the media and its portrayal of black men recently has just reminded me that we've come so far, but we have so far to go in terms of
right.
like equalizing or attempting to place ourselves on an equal stance with our counterparts who don't
Hmm.
happen to be, black men or African American people. And so just a constant reminder of the troubles that the world's faced with, that we're trying, but it's just a hard situation to be in right now.
I definitely agree. And I think we can see that from kind of all angles of it, of, what it means to kind of be one black first, but then be a man or then be a woman, or, so you can kind of see it from all different angles. And I know you said that it's kind of harsh to say it like that, but that's the reality of
Yes. Yeah.
of the world we live in right now, right? And that's kind of what is being shaped by those in power, or those who are being idolized, or those who people listen to,
Yeah.
right? So it's kind of hard to, like, how do I then kind of restructure myself basically for who I am in order to kind of meet the world where it is,
Yeah.
in so many words, right?
That's
And
exactly.
so it's, I think about how you're saying, like, once you have your scrubs on and you have your white coat on, and you're Dr. Sherman, right? But the moment you leave out of there, you're just Josh,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
So
That's it.
it's like, what is that like when you have to kind of perhaps split the two, or understand maybe the world in which you live in? Is there a difference between how you think as Dr. Josh or Dr. Sherman, and then just as Josh?
I think luckily, personally, there hasn't been much of a difference because I was very intentional in my education, in
Mm,
my training, in my current job of never elevating myself above anyone else, right? And never thinking myself to be better, wiser, stronger, smarter, or any of those things, because I recognize that we're all just people out here trying to do our best and just, get through this
right.
world and have a good time in doing it. And so I treat people respectfully, whether I'm in the hospital representing Dr. Sherman, or I'm, Josh on the street going to a party or second line or club or whatever it is I'm doing. So I
Hmm.
tend to be the same person. And so my view of the world is not necessarily shaped by which of those, you know, people I'm representing at the time. And it's much more just based in reality. Like I just recognize and I say all the time that, I'm a black man in this world, and I'm probably to a fault, sort of hyper aware of my black
Mm,
maleness, no matter where I am. And a part of that, though, is because I, this sounds whatever, but I currently work in a situation where I'm the only black man, black physician on my, in my
mm,
emergency department. I'm the only black male physician in this emergency department that has been here for decades, 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 and serves a very, very, very diverse population. And so I
mm,
actually had this conversation with them because I trained at a place in New Orleans where, it was a diverse group. Like we had pretty much representation from every ethnicity, nationality, etc. But then when you come here, and I'm the only one. At first, I used to, struggle with should I cut my beard because I don't want people to think one way about my beard. Should I, not wear, because I'm generally wearing a t-shirt and scrubs to work. Should I wear a white coat every day? Do I need a tie? Like I'm trying to change
mm,
myself in order to accommodate other people's opinions, or help them to form a better opinion of me. But it took me a full year of being here to realize that's not my responsibility. And so I
mm,
shouldn't have
absolutely.
exactly. I shouldn't have to change who I am, what I do, how I, display myself to please you. And so I just keep that same sort of attitude, whether I'm in the hospital, or if I'm home being Josh. I just try to be a, nice young man who is respectful, and easy to talk to, easygoing, the Josh that my mom raised. And I never forget that,
Right.
regardless of what I'm doing at the time.
Right. That's so good to hear. and like, I guess coming from this perspective and some of the things I hear,
Yeah.
basically, of how people face those same struggles,
Yeah.
right? But I think what I get out of it, like from what you're saying, is in a lot of ways, it probably makes you more relatable,
Yeah.
right, to your patients,
So,
because while this staff may not necessarily look like you or where you come from, right?
my
Perhaps
patience.
I do, but
Yep.
my patients
Exactly.
are, they're diverse.
Yep.
Okay, so they sometimes kind of pick you out
Yes.
sometimes in the room of, you
Yep.
may be the only person they open up to and give that real medical history to,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
Or or that they talk to, or hold in respect, or in that kind of way. Or and sometimes it becomes kind of comforting,
Yeah.
especially, like, I can imagine if I'm in a medical crisis and
Yeah.
I'm seeing you in the emergency room, sometimes seeing somebody like me might
Absolutely.
make it a little bit more comforting
Every
in
time.
what I'm experiencing.
Every single time. There have been countless times where, uh, even if I'm not primarily taking care of that patient, the patient sees me, they'll ask for, especially in the pandemic where people, your
Mm,
family can't be there. You don't know if this is going to be your last day on earth. You don't know what's happening. You're
mm-hmm,
scared, you're confused, you're crying. And to see someone who looks like you is smiling, or is, giving you some sort of gesture to sort of, help you in this moment. People love that. People cherish that. I've gotten notes from patients, and that's why I continue to
mm.
be there. That's why I continue to be there. Like, it's for a full year. I wanted to quit where I was currently working, and
Wow.
leave because it was such a new territory for me, and it was like,
Hmm.
it was exhausting. I would be in my mind too much. Like, I wonder if they think I'm this. I wonder what they. And then I just had to say, you know what? I literally can't spend my time worrying about what people think of me in this regard, because I would drive myself crazy. Like, you would literally
You
go,
absolutely will, right? And we sometimes we live in our heads too much
yeah,
and don't
yeah,
realize how that is affecting us, and
exactly.
and then our performance,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, good for
Uh,
you for deciding that, like, okay, I can't do
I
this
can't do it.
anymore. This is not working for me.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it doesn't work for your patients,
No,
right?
not
it
at all.
it just doesn't, because if I'm too worried about what I look like or how I'm perceived, how can I then kind of focus on what you
Yeah.
need from me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. You're right.
So probably an interesting perspective that you can offer that maybe some of us don't see is, like, what's it like being someone who had their own mental health journey, but then also is like a doctor in the emergency room setting, of like, what does that look like, basically, from, like, how is it manifested, or what does it look like, so that people kind of understand kind of what we're dealing with right now.
Honestly, on this side of the journey, it looks like joy. It looks like liberation on this side of it.
Mm,
So I can now say that, going back to this conversation we were just having, I'm gonna wear my t-shirt and scrubs and walk in there and be the same loud New Orleans Josh that's saying how you doing to everybody,
right.
hugging everyone, just loving on everyone, and having this big personality, and be happy about it and not care what other people might think about it. Whereas on the other side of it, what it looks like was insecurity, insomnia. I can't sleep because I
Mm,
have to work tomorrow, and I'm wondering, should I wear this? Should I go like this? Should I do? It's just, it looked terrible. It looks like, in that time, it looks like me being 80 pounds bigger than what I currently am. It looks like me
mm.
eating fast food every day. It looks like me drinking alcohol every day and being at a, club every single weekend. That's what it looks like on that side of the journey for me. It's just like I was channeling this negative energy and the negative impact of, you know, what I described. Probably, I think I was more anxious than depressed. I think I was more
Mm,
insecure than angry. Like, these are words that I kind of give to what I was feeling at the time. But it just looks like the picture of just being unhealthy. Like, honestly, that's what it looks like.
right.
Now on this side, it just looks like health, exercise, joy, travel. And so it
Mhm.
was a hell of a journey. Just imagine though, I'm like trying to spend all weekend turning up at the club, because I'm too worried during the week about what people are thinking about my tattoos
Mm,
at work or thinking about my beard or whatever. And so then
mhm.
I still have to go because that's my job, right? I'm still
Right?
taking
You
care of the
still got
patient.
to do the work.
Still got to do the work. So I'm still taking care of the patients well. In fact, the people at work would have no idea that I was having all these internal struggles. And so
Mm,
it felt like masking at work. It felt like a dual personality at the time. But then through counseling, through weekly at that time, well, twice weekly
mhm.
conversations and visits. Again, now on this side of it, it looks like me being able to talk about this with you. It looks like everything opposite of what it was at the beginning. And it's the best thing I've ever done and felt.
That is so amazing. Like, I'm definitely here for the Black boy joy.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, definitely here for it. But
Yeah.
it, something that I think I, face even like kind of following my passion and kind of launching this mental health blog and awareness is kind of like those perceptions, worried about like how will I be perceived? Should I show my tattoo? Should I not show my tattoo? Should I be buttoned up, or should I have on a blazer all the time? Or,
Yeah.
how, or even like, even talking and kind of starting to meeting with the people that I'm going to be bringing on and them asking the simple questions of, well, what should I wear? Right. You don't realize the impact that that can have on who's viewing your stuff, or, you open yourself up to so much criticism. Right. So I think, and that's in our world, right? When we're quote unquote the walking well, as we like to call it, right?
Yeah.
The walking well who may have overcome those challenges and kind of, crossed over the wall and kind of is on the other side of things, where you're experiencing the positive side of kind of taking care of your mental health and, doing the necessary work to get you better. But what about those people or those men who still carry those perceptions with them? Like, that's heavy because they're often seen as quote unquote like the problem, or they're portrayed as the deviant because they have tattoos or beard or long hair or no hair, or or like historically, the Black man has been perceived as, the boogeyman, right? The one who you got to cross the street for when you see them walking on the same side as you. So what do you think has been like some of those? I mean, I like to say misconceptions because I've been fortunate to know the other side of that we're not those things,
Yeah.
So what do you think? Like, how have you experienced those, or can you debunk some of those misconceptions and myths that the world has?
Yeah. I think that we being the world, begin to create a misconception and we create a fallacy the moment we look at someone and judge them based on
Mm,
anything externally. So the moment someone is saying, "Oh my God, he has dreads, he must be X." "Oh my God, he got an arm full
mhm,
of tattoos, he must be X." "Oh my God, he's listening to that music so loud, he must be X." Whatever that thing is, the moment we start doing that, you've already messed up because then you've shut yourself
mm,
out from being able to get to know who that person actually is. I think I have been blessed enough to come from such a diverse group of friends. We're diverse in every
mhm,
aspect of like every way that you can imagine, right? Of us, I'm the only one with an advanced degree, if you will, with a terminal degree or with this sort of job. But every single one of us has had a journey, has had people to mischaracterize us, has had people to treat
mm,
us poorly based on what we look. Again, people don't see when I walk into, the happy hour down on the south side that I go to all the time. Nobody's looking at me and saying, "Oh, there goes Dr. Sherman. That's Josh." Like, that's Josh. And that same
absolutely.
thing holds true when I go to an unfamiliar place or a place where it's not all of us in terms of brown and black people there. When I walk in and looking how I'm looking, people put me in that same box that they're putting these people with whatever other characteristic that people might find unpleasant or unflattering or abnormal. And so I think
Mhm,
I would debunk that by saying we just have to accept that not everyone is going to really get to know us for the people that we
mm,
really get to know our core, really get to know our values. People will judge us, and that's not our problem. That's not my problem.
Mm,
The moment I
absolutely.
the moment I think that the moment we accept that and choose to move on in our lives and love on the people who love on us, then we can
Mm.
take a step in our
You are preaching a word today.
but it's true. It's true. Just imagine, this is actually hitting really close to me because a mentee of mine, he is 19,
Mm,
a 19-year-old Chicagoan, has had a troubled upbringing. Looks like me in the sense that we both we share common sleeves. He has long
uh-huh.
dreads. The nicest little dude I've encountered. Such a genuine person, but is so troubled by people's opinion of him that
Mm,
it has put him in a sunken place, for lack of a better way to describe that place. And so we spent so much time, like I spent so much time trying to explain to him is that you like the way you look, we love
mm.
you, so we love the way you look. The way you look has nothing to do with what your heart looks like on the inside, and that's what should matter in the long run. But I think when we allow our mental health to kind of be, and I don't know the answer to this, but it's easier to be affected by things external to us, and it's harder to mentally block those things and just be comfortable in who we are. And that's, I think,
Very hard.
exactly. And I think that is one of the good lessons in like seeking help, somebody that helps you accept you, move on with you, and love you, makes those external pressures and forces much less important.
Absolutely. And when people, especially our brown and black people, finally do seek out, I think that has been one of the things that has stayed on the forefront of my mind, being the therapist or quote unquote the expert, right? Is helping you get to know who you are and being comfortable with who you are, because until that happens, right, you can't face these other things that are going on in your life, or you can't create those intrinsic or internal motivations and self efficacy strategies or coping mechanisms to deal with the things that you face with on the outside if you can't stand firm and kind of own who you are as a person, no matter where you come from, what your past was like, what that journey has looked like, right? It's often where it's like, in my field, we sometimes struggle with imposter syndrome, right? So sometimes we have to remind ourselves of, well, they hired me
Yeah,
for me looking exactly how I look, right? They know who I am. I know who I am. And I have to stand firm in who I am and know that I'm here for a reason, right? I didn't get, like, I got here for being me. And that's enough,
that's enough.
right? And I think sometimes we have to kind of remind ourselves, even as a community or people around us, maybe sometimes need to do the reminding, because you know I often say we're our biggest and harshest critic, right? So sometimes we need
That's true.
that friend or that mentor, or mom, dad, grandma, to kind of just hold you and kind of remind you of, like, you got this, right?
Listen, we
you
need
know
all of those people, like all of it.
yeah.
It's not surprising to me when you think about this, like the concept of people like having these internal struggles and it sort of externally looking like depression, externally looking like anxiety, or
Mm,
like acting out, or looking like violence, and looking like so many different things. It's not surprising when you think about so many people in our age group, our, race, like so many Black young folks have not had the luxury of being even some relatively simple things of being raised in a two-parent home where we have two
mm-hmm,
working parents that can like love on us and pray into us and like fill our cup. Like a lot of
mm-hmm,
people haven't had that experience, or to go to schools where the teachers are really preaching into you and building you up. We haven't had those experiences, and so it's hard for us now when we enter young adulthood to expect somebody to just automatically find those intrinsic qualities and just be enough for themselves, when for years through childhood,
mm,
child development, they've been torn down and by various means, it's just very, very difficult. And I think that is sort of underscores the importance of having, like, choosing your friends, choosing your
Mhm.
mentors, and being around people who build you up as much as you build them up. Like, I think that's
Mhm.
very, very important and cannot be overstated.
And I think one word that you said earlier was like intentional.
Yeah.
So I think that plays a huge part in this is like being very intentional about your decisions or who you surround yourself with or who pours into you and how you then pour into other people, right? So because like you were saying though how it may look on outside and how we may then label it as anxiety or depression may not be what's really happening on the inside. Perhaps maybe you're just angry or you're in pain or you're hurt or disappointed, or you know and that's not to say that you're not struggling with anxiety or depression, but it's also to say that there's more underneath the surface than kind of what we often show.
Exactly.
And I think that kind of brings me to my next point about how, we see that Black men, especially, are less likely to seek help, right? Because in the world that they may have grown up in from childhood or young adulthood or even adulthood now, right? It's seen as, well, that's crazy, or I'm gonna be the crazy person, or I'm gonna be labeled as the crazy person, right? Or it wouldn't even be appropriate to kind of even talk about with your family because so much of the historical underpinnings is we kind of sweep that under the rug, or well we just gonna pray it away, or you get that stuff. And or even just the taboo nature of mental health in general. So it makes me think about, like, what do you think might be the consequences of kind of neglecting those internal struggles, of like what is really happening with your mental health? Because something is going on, right? We're seeing it. Something is happening.
You hit the nail on the head. I think the consequences of continually, brushing off mental health struggles, attributing it to something else, ignoring the warning signs. The consequences are what we unfortunately are seeing, in all of our family groups, extended family, extended friend
Mm,
circles. The consequences are alcoholism, drug abuse, suicide, violent
mm,
that land us in jail, misery in general that lands us with problems like homelessness and these various things. All of those, I think, are reflections of uh, undiagnosed, undertreated, um, sort of undervalued mental health issues. Like, people, as you were saying, especially Black people, especially Black men, have never really, up until this generation, now that we're talking about it, we've not really been encouraged to, seek mental health advice or services, or to talk about it. Like you're saying, we go to church. That's the answer to it. Go to church and pray about it, or don't talk about that. It'll be fine. Or you look down upon, like, just with so many other things. And so now that it's starting to come to the forefront, we're learning that a lot of the problems that we faced um, have been due to not being able to talk about those things. And so I think once we have a better sort of collective understanding of people, the effect that people's mental health has on their physical health, their physical well-being,
mm,
their overall
mhm,
wellness, then I think we're going to continue, like we are now, to be more comfortable talking about it. We will notice it in our family members and in our friends, and then they'll feel more comfortable talking about it with us, and seeking help, as it should be. And I think the other problem that you run into then, which is a whole nother topic, is availability of mental health resources. And so there's a problem,
Ugh,
right? So there's a problem of, not being able to talk about it, or not recognize it, not wanting to talk about it. But this generation, programs like this, people like you, are helping to bring that to the forefront so that people are more willing to talk about it. But then it's the next issue are helping to bring that to the forefront so that people are more willing to talk about it. But then it's the next issue I think that we'll be facing, and or maybe facing concurrently, is now that we're having all these people to, recognize the issues, when are we going to have sufficient sort of treatment options or therapy services or whatever the case may be for those people. And I think the good news out of all that, because all that sounds a little bit doom and gloom, but the good news is that people are talking about it. And I think that changes
Mhm.
are certainly imminent.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. The more we kind of put it out there in the forefront of this is kind of uh, something we need to work on, or something where we need to do better at or in, right? Is how we then provide the resources and act, and let's not talk about access, right? To kind of quality care, because that's the other side of things. So as great as it is for, the Black and the brown community to see more of us, we're still outnumbered,
Yeah.
right? By the majority population. We are still outnumbered. So, part of my role and kind of where my research kind of lies is like, okay, so if I'm still going to be outnumbered and, I can only do so much, right, with who I am as one person, right? It's like, how do I then kind of train other people or other ethnicities and nationalities to be more culturally competent to serve the diverse population that we are seeing? Because in 2025, which we're getting very close to right now, or 2030, right, the white Americans, who consist of the majority right now, will no longer be the majority
Right.
anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's starting to feel like, okay, we're getting there, but we still have some ways to go. And one of the things that I really like in my training that they were trying to do was kind of train us as health psychologists, right? Kind of putting us in the doctor's offices, or putting us in the emergency rooms, and or the trauma centers, or some of these nonprofit kind of organizations where they may be more likely to go to you as a doctor, right, to talk about their physical health, than to come to me as a mental health provider,
Yeah.
right? So, in that sense, how do you think we can kind of bridge the gap between my world and kind of your world?
I think, as you were alluding to, it takes a team approach. It takes a team approach. It takes people from multiple specialties coming together to do what's right for the person. We have this issue
Mm,
in the hospital, for instance. Like, what this reminds me of is when we have people who are victims of trauma, for instance.
mhm,
People we've seen before. Last month they were shot in the leg. This month they're shot in the arm. Or this month, they were bitten by the dog while they were doing X, Y, and Z. And so we have these, repetitive clients sometimes that come into the
mm.
hospital, and I
Or as we like to call them, frequent flyers.
I'm not always equipped to handle all of their problems, right? I can help you, I can sew up your wounds and help you from a traumatic standpoint, but you need more than that. Like that, there's a mental health issue at stake here. And I think that's where it becomes important to have a collaborative work environment. And I think the places where I'm working are doing a good job by having psychologists at the bedside that can help to speak with the folks to ensure proper follow-up care. They've been opening up various centers where they can see them following the injury to kind of talk about the root of the injury, their job
Mm,
resources. I think having a sort of collective goal and working together is the only way to really curb these things. I've realized one of the limitations for me is that I can fix up your wounds, I can stitch up your bullet holes,
mm.
but I don't always have the time or the expertise, honestly, to get to the root of the problems. And I think that's where the multidisciplinary approach comes in,
Yes, absolutely. And I think my personal experiences just in some of my training working on kind of multidisciplinary teams, like I've seen it work, but you have to have the willing participants
yes.
there, right? Or you have to have the people who have that perspective or that mindset to want to do that kind of work. And I think sometimes that's where we fail,
Yeah.
our people,
Yeah.
basically, is not being able to provide for them holistically as a person, because it's not just about the physical wound, as you say, like I can stitch you up and I can kind of put a cast on you
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something like that, but it's like, well, what about those other things? What about the fact that you only come to see me when it's an emergency,
Yeah.
or where you only come to see me in a crisis, or the fact that, well, you might be homeless.
Right.
So you have no way to find resources or people to get in contact with you for you to continue the work to get better, right? So I think that's kind of,
Yeah, you're right. Now,
yeah.
I was gonna say
No,
this.
you're good.
What can we do to stop you from getting to that point? That's the thing, and I think
Yes.
that's where that multidisciplinary team comes into play.
Hmm.
So important.
Yeah, absolutely. And and as great as all of that sounds, right? Because in a quote unquote perfect or normal world, it would be lovely,
Yeah,
right? But the reality is not everybody is ready to take those steps, or not everybody is ready to talk about it with you, even as the doctor, or even if you're the nurse, right? Who is maybe perhaps seeing the patient a little bit more frequently,
yeah.
right? So I know that, in our discussions prior to us kind of coming together today, you do some reading on your own, which, I absolutely love, because, I talk about bibliotherapy is what we call it, the formal word for it, but all the time, because sometimes they're not ready to take that next step, or to make that phone call, but perhaps they might read something or listen to something. So why don't you tell us kind of maybe what you like to read? I won't spoil it. You say it.
The book that I'm reading right now is called "Can't Hurt Me" by David
Mm,
Goggins. "Can't Hurt Me" by David Goggins. Um, but generally speaking, I try to read books that are, I wouldn't classify them necessarily as self-help, but I think they kind of fall somewhere near there, right? It's about
mhm,
realistic books about people who have had their own struggles to learn how they have overcome those struggles. Can't Hurt Me, which is a great book, and I'm reading it. It's such a fast read, and I love it. But it's about this guy who found himself in one of his lowest points. He was struggling
mhm,
with like obesity, marital problems. His dad was beating him and his mom, like all sorts of like unimaginable
mm,
things.
mhm.
And it's about how he himself overcame all of those things to now become one of the best and most storied Navy SEALs, who is an ultramarathon,
Wow.
phenomenal person. And even though I'll never be a Navy SEAL, right? I'm not SEAL. I'll never run, 100 miles or do any of those things. From that story, I'm learning about resilience and
Mhm.
perseverance and just like strength. And so the book has been a game changer. In fact, I've already bought it for like 5 of my friends to share with them. Um,
Love it.
so
Spread the knowledge.
it's
Spread
a
the knowledge.
seriously, it's a good book. It's just it's motivational. It's a really motivational text to read how this person overcame all these things, because having the strength to overcome whatever struggle it is that we or you or I am dealing with. It's not intuitive all the time. It's not
It's not.
people don't always have that like bank to draw from to find that
Mhm.
strength in themselves. And so what I'm learning from this book is that it's important to, even right now, have conversations like this, because this will fill someone's cup. It's filling my cup. And so then when I go on and have another struggle, as they come, because they come for every single one of us, then we have more to
Mhm.
draw from and more experiences to talk about. We're more willing to talk about it. That right now is my book. And I'm always open and looking for other books. So if someone's watching this and wants to suggest one, please.
Please do leave a comment, leave a suggestion, leave a link, for, not just myself or Josh to maybe look at, but then also for the rest of the viewers, because like I say, you never know who's watching or who's listening or who's willing to learn or to kind of take that first step. So the more the merrier. Definitely, definitely. Um, so one of the other things that I think, it comes that we mentioned like a little bit ago was about resources, right? So I'm new to Chicago, right? This is kind of my little home away from home for a little while, kind of rooting myself here for a minute. But in NOLA, I know of a few places. There's a nonprofit organization called A Helping NOLA Pedal. There's Southern Solidarity. And then, of course, there's like, the crisis response team, River Oaks Addiction kind of detox line. Within the community, for those who may have like Medicaid or who are uninsured, we have Crescent Care, and we have MHSD, which has locations throughout the city. And then also one of the amazing things that they are starting to do, which kind of alludes to what I was saying about kind of placing us in the hospital, is UMC's Trauma Recovery Center. So those are just a few things which you'll definitely see at the end of this, of maybe how to get in contact with them and stuff like that. But what resources are there available to perhaps our Chicago or nearby people to Chicago? You know, if they're looking for help or looking for resources or a safe space, basically.
I will say the biggest, probably most readily available resources for people who are, dealing with issues with depression, anxiety, any like host of mental health related issues, or even issues that are related to, domestic violence, which sometimes unfortunately goes hand in hand with some of these mental health issues.
Definitely.
There are at every single hospital, especially in this area with such high volume because of the population here. Every
Mm-hmm.
hospital in this area is tied to mental health resources, be it a clinic, be a counseling service. So if you are at the point where you are, especially if you're feeling, thoughts of suicide, thoughts of homicide, delusions, hallucinations,
Mm-hmm.
please, 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 the first step is to go to your nearest emergency room, because we can direct
Mm-hmm.
you where you need to be from there. We can help to care for you. That is the initial step. Beyond that, there's the Chicago Family Health host, or clinic network, that are placed all throughout the city and even in the surrounding like suburban areas. That's called Chicago Family Health. If you Google just that name, it'll list a bunch of different clinics that also help with mental health resources. And then the other big one for a lot of people is near and dear to me, that are on the south side of Chicago, which is where I work and practice. My hospital is affiliated with a building that's called the Trauma Recovery Unit. So the Trauma
Mm-hmm.
Recovery Unit, affiliated with Advocate Christ Medical Center, not only helps to provide care for victims of various traumatic injuries, but also helps with, mental health related issues, referrals if a higher level of care is needed, and just various ways to help people that are struggling in whatever capacity they are. Again, the most readily available is that Chicago Family Health Network, because they're all over. But if you're on the south side,
Mm-hmm.
the recovery unit is big. And of course, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about just anywhere, if someone's listening that's not from either of those places, the National Suicide Hotline. I always
Yes.
use it. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you're feeling acutely suicidal or homicidal, if you're feeling triggered, 911 even.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then one of the other really great resources kind of nationally is NAMI. So NAMI has basically offices and locations kind of all over the United States. So no matter where you are, what state or what city you in, there is a local NAMI association that you can reach out to and be able to speak with somebody. So definitely want to put that out there. And don't think that you guys got to write all of this down as we're talking. At the end, there will be links and names of these places we talked to, in addition to others as well, for you to be able to provide them for other people in your life, or maybe people you don't know, because you never know who you may run into, right? Or even just for yourself to kind of take that first step in kind of healing yourself, basically, from the struggles that you may be experiencing or have experienced in the past. So definitely love, love, love. It's good to hear that we do have some resources, even though we still have a long way to go, but I'm loving it.
Long way to go.
Um,
Yeah.
yes. But as we kind of come to the end of our discussion, which I feel like we just kind of scratched the surface of kind of your own journey and Black men and mental health and kind of the state of the Black man, I definitely want to emphasize that you are not alone in this. As you can see, like I've talked about my own personal experiences, Josh has kind of talked about his journey, but you are definitely not alone in this. But if you were kind of had some last words or some maybe that helps somebody get up basically and just stand up, right? Metaphorically, right? But stand up for themselves and begin that healing process. What would you say?
My, as simple as it sounds, what I would say to that would be, we see you, we need you.
Mm,
Your family sees you, your family needs you. And so let's do everything that we can to get you to value you and get back to a place of joy and happiness. I say that to myself. I say that to my friends and my family members, because it's easy to lose sight of that in the midst of all the worry, panic, sadness, and all these variable
mhm,
emotions. We need you. Your family loves you. You love you. Do whatever it takes
mm.
to get back to a good place. Reach out.
Love, love, love it. And, it's great that you kind of share that kind of motivational speech, not just with yourself, but then with the people within your circle. So it leads me to, I guess you would say, the question of the moment is what's your why, right? What keeps you going? Why do you do what you do?
My why is exactly that. It's because I realize and appreciate and really believe that my being here, is about much more than me, right? It's about
Mm,
me being able to pour into someone else as much as they've poured into me. It's about me being able to look look like someone else who wants to be in this position, right? It's about me being able to show my face and stand up to whatever my fears and conquer every battle that's in front of me, so that the next person behind me doesn't have to fight as hard, so that they can see
mm,
something in me that hopefully sort of lights a flame in them and lets them know that if I can do it, me being regular old Josh with nothing special, if I can, then so can he, she, they do the same thing. So that's
love it.
why. My why is for not only myself but everyone else.
I absolutely love it. And thank you for sharing that why. And I want to thank you for being here today and kind of joining me on this passion project of mine and this journey and trying to help people understand that they matter, their mental health matter. Um, and hopefully, this touches somebody and reaches somebody because I always say if I could just reach one person, then I've kind of done my job. So once again, thank you. You are appreciated. You are valued. And we hope to have you again because I'm sure you can provide some more stuff that's some good stuff for us and those out there. So thank you and thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a phenomenal conversation. Thank you for allowing me to also sort of, talk about things that I hadn't spoken about in some time. It's therapeutic for me, and I hope it is for someone watching as well. Thank you.
Mental health matters. Mental health matters. Mental health matters. Mental health.